The Christian Atheist is also available on YouTube, and you will find other great content, including the literature I frequently refer to, on our Simple Gifts podcast. If you find our content helpful, consider supporting us through PayPal at Romans chapter 5 at Comcast.net. Welcome to No Compromise, where faith and reason fuse in conversation. Qu'ils sont beaux, les pieds.
So, John, I was thinking about the garden itself. What do you think of it? Like, what do you think about it being like a theophany?
Yeah, it does seem to me as though the garden, as it appears in various incarnations throughout the Chronicles of Narnia, is some sort of an appearance of God.
Yeah.
It's certainly, I think we said last time that it's kind of like the room of requirement. Yeah. God meets us where we are and where we need to be met. And it seems as though the gardens arise in that way. I mean, the Garden of Youth that Diggory was sent to, and then as we've been reading The Horse and His Boy, the Hermit of the Southern March seems also to be ensconced in a garden.
Right.
And that's the Southern March. Mm-hmm. And then it occurred to me that maybe it was like the points of the compass, that God meets us everywhere, but then we have not been able to find any corresponding garden to the north.
Right. There was this garden here is in the west.
In the west.
And then there's the Hermit garden in The Horse and His Boy. That's in the south.
Right.
Aslan's country is to the east.
Right. So and like in Reepicheep's rhyme, the utter east. So Aslan's country is all the way to the east.
Right.
But it doesn't seem as though there's a corresponding one to the north, which if there had been, I guess it would have been presented in.
The silver chair.
In the silver chair, yes, that's where it would have been.
Yeah, because that's when they go north.
Right.
So we'll have to see when we get to the silver chair
whether there's any indication of that. Yeah.
Okay. And then what about in the garden, the tree?
You made the point last time, and I thought it was absolutely dead on. It's like in both cases, and we haven't gotten, of course, to The Horse and His Boy yet. We're still dealing with The Magician's Nephew. Yeah. But in both cases, the garden is almost identical, the way they describe it. The wall of turf, the beautiful tree in the middle, and there's always some sort of water structure.
Yep.
And as you pointed out last time, Jesus is the bread of life. He is the water of life. And Adam is thrown out of the garden for having sinned, having eaten from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And he's therefore forbidden to eat of the fruit of life, because if he were to do so, he would live forever, just like Jadis, in this case, lives forever, but living forever in sin.
Right.
And God has a different solution in mind than that. Yeah. The beauty of the garden is that there we find God and there we find life.
Well, God's solution is to eat of the tree of life.
Right.
But on His terms.
Yeah.
John, isn't it in The Horse and His Boy, doesn't the hermit say something about you can only come in if the hermit allows you to come in? I thought there was something about that, because the garden in the west that Diggory goes to, you can only come in through the door.
Right.
And that's the rule.
And and the gates would only open for those who have the right to come in.
Right. And I thought the hermit said something similar, but
yeah, there is something like that. I think there was like an invitation to come in.
Like you were saying about how it's like Eden, the Garden of Eden, a walled paradise, and the serpent illicitly there.
Right.
Just like is in Paradise Lost.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if those of you who are fans of our broader structures might want to go to Paradise Lost in the Simple Gifts podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, which is in the Simple Gifts. If you want to check it out on the web, you say Simple Gifts with John Wise, because there's other Simple Gifts.
Right, and then usually you can search particular pieces, because we have over 300 episodes of Simple Gifts.
All kinds of stuff.
So if you search for Paradise Lost or John Milton, it should bring bring that up for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, Paradise Lost is something that C.S. Lewis absolutely adored.
Exactly.
So yeah, and the serpent in the Bible story, and of course in Paradise Lost, Lucifer, Satan,
Mm-hmm.
was in the garden illicitly, right?
Mm-hmm.
God creates the garden for the benefit of all of us. And the walled garden is the idea of keeping out the bad.
Right.
But when human beings invite the bad in,
Mm-hmm.
we have to deal with the consequences.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's like even in the garden we find
Like,
the temptations.
right, the transgression of structure.
Mm-hmm.
You said something earlier which reminded me of this, how Diggory is returning to Eden to undo the transgression, just like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Right, almost like a second Adam of
Yeah.
sorts.
Yeah.
But Diggory is almost like it's kind of an odd mix of metaphors because he's the first Adam, he's the one who's brought the sin.
Right.
But then Aslan makes him responsible for his sin,
right,
and has him take care of the repair by going to get the apple.
right.
But it is a return to Eden, and of course, anytime I think of a return to Eden, I think of you and I.
Yeah.
Because both of us had a bit of a rough go in the first part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
and somehow or other, God brought us to a garden.
Exactly.
Where the tree of life grows and the water of life feeds us. And yeah, so yeah, I think of that all of the time whenever I think of a walled garden.
Mm-hmm. And it's our story.
Our story, as told in the Christian Atheist, episodes 2 through 9 or 10, the machinery of the looking glass.
And nothing happens the same way twice.
Right, and that's a point that Lewis makes repeatedly in his
Space Trilogy. He says that
in the Space Trilogy. He says that yes, nothing ever happens the same way twice.
Right.
And so when we see like the redemption story in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Aslan dies for Edmund, and that is certainly different from the biblical narrative where Christ dies for all of mankind.
Right.
And that it would have to be different because we are told in the New Testament that Christ, the sacrifice in the Holy Land, in the first part of this era, back in the 0s to the 33, when Christ actually died historically, that was the overcoming of sin, the defeat of death. And therefore, Aslan would not have to die in that way in Narnia
the fulfillment of the law.
To fulfill the law, right? Because the law was fulfilled once and for all.
Right. And then I think we say about nothing happens the same way twice. I think about how in the Garden of Eden, God said, you cannot eat of the tree. And that was the one rule.
Right.
And then after they ate of the tree and they sinned, then Jesus comes and says, okay, now you can eat of the tree.
Eat of the tree, yes.
One last point, maybe in this garden scene, how the witch argues that the lion has made Diggory heartless.
Oh, yeah.
And the lion represents Christianity.
Right.
Because he's willing to let his mother die.
Right. I can't help
argument.
But see here the constant refrain that we get from, I know I always say, but from the left, who would really rather we go into an entirely secular culture.
Yeah.
And of course, they don't care so much about any other religion, but they do seem to have a very specific bee in their bonnet against Christianity.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, the witch says that this Aslan has made you hard. And that's what we get from them all the time, that you Christians are hard-hearted, and you hate gays, you hate trans people, and it's just not true. And it's not hardness. They take one of the classical virtues and turn it into the whole of ethics.
Right.
And you can't do that.
Right.
Ethics is a balance.
Right.
And if you only emphasize one, as Aristotle told us clearly, you will end up taking that to a vice.
Right.
And that's what they've done. They've taken niceness and made it, and kindness, yes, and made it into a vice rather than balancing it with all of the other necessary virtues.
Right. So compassion is not the supreme value.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they seem to want to make it
Yeah.
like the whole of ethics.
Right.
And it can't bear that, because being compassionate isn't enough. Justice, self-control, loyalty, accountability, rational consideration, truth itself, all of those things must be weighed in the balance.
Right.
I mean, there may be times to say it's better not to say something unkind rather than speaking the truth.
Right.
But we can't sacrifice the truth in order to be kind.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. So, yeah, having done that, that's kind of where we wanted to start this week as an introduction to the scene in the garden,
Right.
which is where we pick up next.
Okay.
So the meeting between Diggory and the witch, he meets with the witch at this point.
Right, that's huge. So he goes into the garden.
Right, and she promises him knowledge.
Right. Well, and the first thing he does is actually pluck the fruit.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
as he was bade to do. So he plucks the fruit.
Bade by Aslan.
Bade by Aslan
Right.
to bring the fruit to him, and
Right.
he makes the mistake of smelling it himself and feels the desire, right? That illicit desire,
right?
But nevertheless, he puts the fruit in his pocket,
right?
But then, as you said, what else happens? While he was thinking of all this, he happened to look up through the branches towards the top of the tree. There, on a branch above his head, a wonderful bird was roosting. I say roosting because it seemed almost asleep. Perhaps not quite. The tiniest slit of one eye was opened. It was larger than an eagle, its breast saffron, its head crested with scarlet, and its tail purple. And it just shows, said Diggory afterwards, when he was telling the story to others, that you can't be too careful in these magical places. You never know what may be watching you.
I wonder if that's the witch.
Yeah,
taking a different form, just like Satan took the form of a serpent.
Right.
And watching his desires and wanting to know what he desires and what he's thinking.
That could be the case,
Mm-hmm.
Although
what do you think?
He sees the witch later, but I can't help.
Because how does he not see her in there?
At that
and then
point,
all of a sudden he does.
Right.
If maybe she took a different form.
But she's apparently standing fairly near to him, even at that point.
Okay.
But he looks up and he sees the bird, and I can't help but think of the bird as a phoenix, right? As the symbol of resurrection, the death and resurrection, of life that dies and comes again. Right. That is eternal in one sense, because it endures the flames that burn off the dead wood and then rises again to new life, almost like happens in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Exactly.
When Aslan is slain on the table,
right,
and then comes back to life.
That's a good point.
So I don't know. I mean, Lewis doesn't explain here what that is, but I can't help thinking of the phoenix.
Okay, so what does she do? She tempts him.
Right. So it says, Diggory was just turning back to go to the gates when he stopped to have one last look around. He got a terrible shock. He was not alone. There, only a few yards away from him, stood the witch, which again seems to make the point to me that the bird is a different, almost a divine,
separate,
right, thing.
Exactly.
The recognition of life and death, the cycle, and also the redemption cycle, right? How life is born from death.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, so she tempts him with the promise of knowledge that he... Go ahead.
Right, so she was just throwing away the core of an apple which she had eaten. The juice was darker than you would expect, and it made a horrid stain around her mouth.
Okay.
Diggory guessed at once that she must have climbed in over the wall. And there's the very clear notion of doing it in the improper
in your own way.
Right? The witch was not invited in. She had no right to come in over the wall.
Exactly.
She violated the deep magic, the structure of reality, which is what magicians do.
Exactly.
And he began to see that there might be some sense in that last line about getting your heart's desire and getting despair along with it. For the witch looked stronger and prouder than ever, and even in a way triumphant. but her face was deadly white, white
Salt.
as salt.
And salt is used to thrown on a field to cause the
Ooh,
field to die.
To kill things. That's
Right.
right. That's Carthage was sown with salt by the
exactly.
Romans.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And the witches, she's gained life, but it's a life that is really like
It's
an
dead.
eternal death.
Right.
Right.
It's a dead life.
Um,
If that's possible. It's an oxymoron.
yeah, but we find, well, that's one of my favorite things about the paradox of coming back to Christ in my life, is to recognize those paradoxes, those things that you cannot fully understand. It's all in the mystery of God, like the God-man himself, and life and death being wound up in the witch like that. All this flashed through Diggory's mind in a second. Then he took to his heels and ran for the gates as hard as he could pelt, the witch after him. As soon as he was out, the gates closed behind him of their own accord. So Diggory is being watched over, whether or not we quite recognize, or whether even he recognizes that he is being protected.
Right.
That gave him the lead, but not for long. Evil always pursues.
Oh.
By that time he had reached the others and was shouting out, "Quick, get on, Polly, get up, Fledge." The witch had climbed the wall or vaulted over it and was close behind him again. "Stay where you are," cried Diggory, turning round to face her, "or we'll all vanish. Don't come an inch nearer."
You shall not pass.
Yeah, that's the Lord of the Rings. Which
That's
is another
Gandalf.
one of our favorites. "Foolish boy," said the witch, "why do you run from me? I mean you no harm."
And now here she is. Here she goes.
"I mean you no harm. The father of lies. He means nothing but harm. If you do not stop and listen to me now, you will miss some knowledge. Oh my goodness."
And that's what I was trying to get to. She promises him some knowledge.
Yes, knowledge that would have made you happy all your life. And that is in its own way true. Because there is a knowledge. I mean, that's the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
That sense that there is something missing, that FOMO, fear of missing out. All human beings have it.
Right. And what happened to you? What happened? What caused you to walk away?
That's exactly the state
you were
I was in.
looking for knowledge.
Right.
You were looking to know it all.
I wanted to know everything. And I hated that Christianity seemed to be like on
didn't fulfill it.
Yeah, it was almost like it was ignorance in the face of knowledge. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm not going to be a fool. I'm going to embrace knowledge and truth, and I'm going to pursue it. And boy, is that seductive. It took me away for 25 years.
Exactly.
And that is a lie, because true knowledge is something that only God has. It's an unobtainable ideal, and we can strive for it. We can move towards it. That's what science is all about, trying to get clearer about the mystery, the infinite mystery of reality.
Don't forget math too.
What's that?
Don't forget math too.
And math. My bane. Jenny is a really she's a math whiz, and she's teaching me math, and it's quite a slog for her, because I'm a tough student.
You're a willing student, and that's all I want.
But math has been my bane all my life, and yet I see it as something extremely valuable. And I might at one point have sold my soul for it. But now Jenny is my soul, so I keep moving towards it with her, and she helps me. Almost every night we study a little bit of math together, and I've come a long way, but I've got a long way to go yet.
We're trying to discover the mathematical harmonies in the mind of the Creator.
That's right, because God is the one who established the world, It's like the language of creation
It's
is mathematics.
unfortunately
Yeah.
for some.
And I'm a mathematical ignoramus.
You are not.
We're working towards
John
correcting
is an
that.
extremely wonderful student. He really is.
So the witch says to him, if you do not stop and listen to me now, you will miss some knowledge that would have made you happy all your life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is that the lie? If only you'll listen to me, I will make you happy.
Exactly. What I have to give you will make you happy.
But all of those things, although they have, like the song by Keith Green says, I put some truth in every lie to tickle itching ears. Satan always puts some truth in. So all of those things may indeed make you happy, but you have to have them in the proper way.
Exactly. That's very true. Just like you have to get into the garden through the gate.
You have to get into the garden through the gate. And that's like the infinite joys of sexuality are attained through marriage, not in any other way. You try to attain them in some other way, and what you'll get is despair. Not joy. Not happiness.
Exactly.
Well, I don't want to hear it, thanks, said Diggory. But he did.
That's the thing.
And that's the human conundrum.
That is exactly right.
We want to hear it.
We do.
And we want to give in to it.
And we do listen to it.
I know what errand you have come on, continued the witch, for it was I who was close beside you in the woods last night and heard all your counsels. You have plucked the fruit in the garden yonder. You have it in your pocket now. Are you going to carry it back untasted to the lion for him to eat, for him to use? You simpleton. Oh, that is devastating to me.
Yes,
because
I know
that
for
is what
sure.
drove me away.
That's exactly what it was.
Yup, because I didn't want to be a simpleton. And the world told me I was a simpleton for believing in God. It took me 25 years to come back and realize that it was the simpleton who walked away.
The fool says there is no God.
The fool has said in his heart, there is no God.
And you realize that now.
I do now. And I realize it at a level I probably never would have if I hadn't gone through those 25 years.
Exactly.
So God was with me through all of those things.
Exactly. And there's no doubt about that at all.
Okay, so the witch continues. Do you know what that fruit is? I will tell you. It is the apple of youth, the apple of life. I know, for I have tasted it. And I feel already such changes in myself that I know I shall never grow old or die. Eat it, boy, eat it, and you and I will both live forever and be king and queen of the whole world, or of your world if we decide to go back there. No thanks, said Diggory. I don't know that I care much about living on and on after everyone I know is dead. I'd rather live an ordinary time and die and go to heaven.
The simplicity of life.
Yeah. And then
the joy and simplicity that simplicity brings.
That is the plan of God. It's like, right? And then the witch pulls out the trump card.
Right. So she couldn't tempt him that way.
The morality card.
Right. He was just a simple boy.
Right.
And then she decides, okay, let's go with your mother.
Yes, but what about this mother of yours, whom you pretend to love so?
Right.
This is the seductive tactic of the left.
Right.
That they constantly use against us. You're not being nice.
With the abortion
issue
now.
Right. The idea that a woman's right to personal autonomy over her body trumps the life of another.
Of a baby.
Right.
Exactly.
But what about this mother of yours whom you pretend to love so?
And of course you're playing on
my sympathies,
on the moral,
on my morality,
on the strength of of the other side's morality.
Yes.
Always playing on the strength of that.
And it's so effective. Because we on this side really do
live by we live by
principles,
values. Exactly.
Right? And they use the principles against us.
Right.
Very effectively.
We live by the traditions, what has always proven to be true.
Right.
We live by that.
Right.
And so that's...
But we see principles as settled things.
Mhm.
They have no settled principles.
Exactly.
Because whatever works to achieve the end
And that's
is
the
their
means
principle.
justifies the ends, which
Yes.
is what you said
Right.
the witch stands for.
Right. What's she got to do with it, said Diggory. Do you not see, fool, that one bite of that apple would heal her?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you see the end? Don't you see the results
Mm-hmm.
that you can achieve if you violate what you know to be right?
But here's what makes me laugh. Go ahead.
What's that?
What does he say about his mother?
Oh, yeah, we get down to that. She says, you have that in your pocket. We're here by ourselves and the lion is far away. Use your magic and go back to your own world. A minute later, you can be at your mother's bedside, giving her the fruit. 5 minutes later, you will see the color coming back to her face. She will tell you the pain is gone. Soon she will tell you she feels stronger. Then she will fall asleep. Think of that. Hours of sweet, natural sleep, without pain, without drugs. Next day, everyone will be saying how wonderfully she has recovered. Your home will be happy again. You will be like other boys. Oh, gasped Diggory, as if he had been hurt, and put his hand to his head, for he now knew that the most terrible of choices lay before him. What has the lion ever done for you that you should be his slave? Said the witch. And what would your mother think if she knew that you could have taken her pain away?
That was the wrong thing to say to him.
Yeah, exactly right. The witch overplays her
Right,
hand,
exactly.
which we see the left doing today.
Exactly.
Right? They keep overplaying their hand.
Mm-hmm.
She brings up her mother.
Right. And that is the one thing.
And what would your mother think if she knew that you could have taken her pain away?
And that's sort of a deep magic in itself.
The deeper magic.
Your mother.
I think of my mother as the deep magic. I really do. And I know you do. Your parents are deep magic for you. And what would your mother think if she knew that you could have taken her pain away and given her back her life and saved your father's heart from being broken, and that you wouldn't?
Uh-oh. Somebody's going to blow.
Cruel, pitiless boy. You would let your own mother die rather than... Oh, shut up, said the miserable Diggory, still in the same voice. Do you think I don't see? But I promised.
Right.
Ah, said the witch. But you didn't know what you were promising. And no one here can prevent you. And this is the moment.
Mm-hmm. This is it.
Mother herself, said Diggory, getting the words out with difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't like it.
Exactly.
Awfully strict. Awfully strict about keeping promises.
Right.
Thank God for awfully strict mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And not stealing. And all that sort of thing.
Exactly.
She'd tell me not to do it. Quick as anything.
Right.
If she was here.
And at that point, he draws a line in himself, inside of himself. It was his inward morals, his inward ethics.
Right.
It was an inward line that he drew. And
the superego that mom helped create in him.
Right.
The recognition that there is right and wrong, and that you must always side with the right.
The tradition.
The tradition. Yes.
And then he comes to another point where he has to draw another line.
Yeah, the witch, exactly right. So following that immediately, the witch says, but she need never know.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is her way of getting around the mom card. Speaking more sweetly than you would have thought anyone so fierce a face could speak. You wouldn't tell her how you'd got the apple. Your father need never know. No one in your world need know anything about this whole story.
Mm-hmm.
You needn't take the little girl back with you.
Uh-oh.
You know.
And that's where she made
Another
mistake.
fatal mistake.
Exactly.
And she made two of them, right? The first one was bringing in the mother.
Right.
Who stands for traditional reality,
Mm-hmm.
for traditional morality,
Right.
for truth.
Within himself.
And he recognizes that
Right.
superego. And then
he has to make a decision to draw the line beyond himself.
Right, beyond himself.
Into society or into the world around him.
And Diggory is a boy.
Uh-huh.
I almost said a man. That's one of the things we've been talking about here.
Yeah.
This sort of plastic division between teenagers and adults
mm-hmm.
in our current understanding of the world.
Right.
But Diggory says, or the witch tries to deceive Diggory, and Diggory recognizes that he has an obligation outside himself to others, to Polly. And she overplays her hand once again.
Right.
That it actually says that in here. That was where the witch made her fatal mistake. The meanness of the suggestion that he should leave Polly behind suddenly made all the other things the witch had been saying to him sound false and hollow. And even in the midst of all his misery, his head suddenly cleared, and he said, in a different and much louder voice, "Look here, where do you come into all of this? Why are you so precious fond of my mother all of a sudden? What's it got to do with you? What's your game?"
And what is and why is she? Because what she's asking him to do is again to go against what his mother taught him.
Right.
His mother's the one that put into him the idea that you got to be true to your friends and to be, true to those around you in society and in the world.
Right.
And that's why he brings up his mother again.
Right. And I mean that's
because this is
so beautiful.
This is an act from the witch against his mother, which is against tradition and against.
Right. And he recognizes right there what's your game.
Right.
He recognizes the morality for what it is.
Right.
Right? It's instead of being a principled view of the world, an embrace of truth, of reality, and of right and wrong. It is a game of ends justify the means. And Diggory rejects it.
And that's what we're seeing so much today in this world.
Oh, the ends justify the means.
That's all it is.
Everywhere.
Yes, that's all it is. Everywhere.
And then this is another one of those places where I almost blub.
Yes. We gotta be careful.
Because Diggory...
You can do it.
Polly whispers in Diggory's ear.
Uh-huh.
Good for you, Diggs.
Oh.
Good for you, Diggs, whispered Polly in his ear. Quick, get away now. And it says this then. She hadn't dared to say anything all through the argument.
I was going to say to you, what's going on with them?
Because, you see, it wasn't her mother.
Right.
That was dying. Polly knew she couldn't make the decision for Diggory. Only Diggory could make it for himself. And that's the freedom that God grants us.
Exactly.
To make our own decisions. Go then, fools, called the witch. Think of me, boy, when you lie old and weak and dying, and remember how you threw away the chance of endless youth. It won't be offered you again.
Be careful what you give to John to read. Many a day has he blubbered. It's kind of a joke in our house.
I guess I don't mind being a joke so much.
You're like the was it the jackdaw? The first joke?
The first joke, yes.
You didn't
And I
say
don't
the
mind being
first
the
joke.
joke,
You
just like
are
he
the
did.
first joke.
Yes.
No, it's kind of a thing with the kids to see if they can make John cry.
So the chapter ends with the children
Mhm,
and Strawberry Fledge coming
mhm,
back, and Diggory walked up to Aslan, handed him the apple, and said,
mhm.
"I've brought you the apple you wanted,
Having
sir."
no idea what Aslan's about, what Aslan's going to do. He
Right.
has no idea
Diggory knows he's given up for real
his chance
those chances that
mhm,
he's wanted so much.
for his
Yep,
mother
for his mother
and his family to be returned to
to
normal
normal.
again.
Yep. So we're getting to the end
Uh-huh.
of this story. Chapter 14, the planting of the tree, is where Diggory is told by Aslan to throw the apple away so that it will grow into a tree that will actually preserve Narnia from the evil of the witch.
Mm-hmm. And Aslan, at this
And
point, Aslan says that the witch will be afraid to come.
mhm. Well, I think these words here
Uh-huh.
are words that we long to hear. "Well done, son of
Oh, yeah.
Adam," said the lion again. "For this fruit you have hungered and thirsted and wept." Right? This journey that I've sent you on, this difficult thing that you've called life, all of the pain that you've dealt with, all of the frustration, all of the anguish that you've gone through, all of the temptations that you've faced. Well done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To hear those words is I don't know, something I long for.
Mm-hmm. So what? So okay. So let's move on and see what does he say about Andrew? He cannot tell this to this old sinner.
Ah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So Uncle Andrew has passed a rather difficult day and night with the beasts, who
Yeah.
have cared for him
Yeah.
very
They have
right,
cared for him.
much more than he would ever have
Mm-hmm.
cared for them. Right?
Exactly.
These rational beasts,
Right.
these creatures
Maybe
that
not the most intelligent, but rational.
yes, that Aslan has raised from mere beasts
Mm-hmm.
to rational persons.
Right.
Right? They have cared for Uncle Andrew much more than he would ever have cared for them.
And he was very intelligent
Right.
compared to them.
"Bring out that creature," said Aslan. One of the elephants lifted Uncle Andrew in its trunk and laid him at the lion's feet. He was too frightened to move. "Please, Aslan," said Polly, "could you say something to unfrighten him? And then could you say something to prevent him from ever coming back here again?" "Do you think he wants to?" said Aslan. So Polly is asking Aslan
Mm-hmm.
for mercy for Uncle Andrew.
Right.
And that is sweet, considering
Considering
what
he's
Uncle
the one that started all of
yes,
this
what Uncle
trouble.
Andrew has done to these children
Mm-hmm.
and to the beasts of Narnia.
But she does recognize that all things work together for good.
Right? And she cares for even
Mm-hmm.
those who have done her wrong, which is exactly
Exactly.
what we're told to do. Aslan, however, responds, "I cannot tell that to this old sinner. That is, that his ideas about Narnia are wrong.
Right.
And I cannot comfort him either. He has made himself unable to hear my voice."
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is that thing that we talked about earlier.
Right.
He refused to see and hear the voice of Aslan for what it was. He
Right.
convinced himself that it was
just
simply
roarings
roarings of a
and
lion.
animal
Right.
talk.
So the
Mm-hmm.
evident, what should have been evident to him,
Mm-hmm.
he rationalized away.
Right.
If I spoke to him, he would hear only growlings and roarings, just like the atheists today are refusing to see
Mm-hmm.
the voice of God in the world around them, the reality of God in the creation
Right.
around us.
Right. He's just roaring.
O Adam's sons, and you see how God laments, how Christ laments. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them that are sent unto thee.
Mm-hmm.
How often would I have gathered thee together as a hen gathers her chicks, and you would not?
Right.
O Adam's sons, how cleverly you defend yourselves against all that might do you good. But I will give him the only gift he is still able to receive. And I think of the Psalms, right? God sends his rain upon the just and the unjust, right? But I will give him the only gift that he is able still to receive. And then he bowed his great head rather sadly and breathed into the magician's face. Sleep, he said. Sleep and be separated for some few hours from all the torments you have devised for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the great themes that runs through C.S. Lewis, right? In his theoretical writings and in the Chronicles of Narnia. The idea that hell is what we make for ourselves.
Exactly.
We separate ourselves from God, and in doing so, we create our own hell because we refuse to see the goodness that he wants to give us.
Exactly. So you go to the story of the witch, Aslan talking about the witch eating the apple.
Right.
What that means.
Okay. So the tree that Diggory threw the apple and planted has already grown up. And Aslan says that this tree will preserve Narnia by preventing the witch from coming, and the children are a little concerned about that. Oh, Aslan, sir, said Diggory, turning red, I forgot to tell you. The witch has already eaten one of those apples, one of the same kind that tree grew from.
Right.
So he's afraid that it won't keep the witch away from Narnia, that Aslan hasn't understood that. He hadn't really said all he was thinking, but Polly at once said it for him. Diggory was always much more afraid than she of looking the fool. So we thought, Aslan, she said, that there must be some mistake, and she can't really mind the smell of those apples. Why do you think that, daughter of Eve? Asked the lion.
Here it is.
Well, she ate one. Child, he replied, that is why all the rest are now a horror to her.
Exactly.
That is what happens to those who pluck and eat fruits at the wrong time and in the wrong way. The fruit is good, just as God says in Genesis.
Yeah, that everything is good.
God saw that it was good, but they loathe it.
Right.
Ever after.
And that's what that goes back to what you've been trying to say, that they hate.
If we don't follow the guidelines that God puts in place, they're not put in place to restrict us from good. They're put in place to give us good.
Exactly.
And if we go about it the wrong way, they bring us nothing but evil and bad.
Saying
because we've done it the wrong way.
Right. They hate women. They hate
the
idea of womanhood.
Like
what
the left. You can't love women and not love what a woman is. A woman is the bearer of life.
Right.
And if you think you can destroy the life within a woman without destroying the woman, the essence of what they are,
right?
It doesn't work that way. Nature has its own way of playing out its reality. Oh, I see, said Polly. And I suppose because she took it in the wrong way, it won't work for her. I mean, it won't make her always young and all that. No, that's not the case. If you engage in sex, you're going to get pregnant.
Exactly.
But if you kill the baby that's inside you, you will bear the consequences of that. Alas, said Aslan, shaking his head, it will. Things always work according to their nature. That is the magic, the deep magic. You can't destroy the nature of things that God has created.
Exactly.
We can't choose our gender.
Exactly. Which again is destroying women,
What's that?
which again is destroying women.
Destroying women, destroying men,
The idea.
destroying all the world. We bring the whole world around. It's just like the palace in Charn. When we seek to overcome, to do magic against the natural world, against the nature that God has established, we bring the whole world around down around our ears.
And then eventually use the deplorable word, I am.
Yeah, I am. We set ourselves as God.
Right.
Alas, said Aslan, shaking his head, it will. Oh, yeah. And that reminds me of the scene in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where the witch is claiming Edmund's life, the traitor's life. Here, I have that here.
Oh, yeah, the deep magic.
Yes, and Susan's question to Aslan. Okay, let's pick it up here.
Okay.
And so, continued the witch, that human creature is mine. His life is forfeit to me. His blood is my property. Come and take it then, said the bull with the man's head in a great bellowing voice. Fool, said the witch with a savage smile. Maybe I shouldn't pause here on this, but I find it interesting. The witch has her own version of happiness. She finds great triumph. There are things in life she enjoys, and it's not that the life against God is devoid of the pleasures of life. They're there.
Right.
They're twisted, but they're still there. God makes his rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Anyway, that's kind of a side point.
That's a good point.
But okay, fool, said the witch with a savage smile that was almost a snarl. Do you really think your master can rob me of my rights by mere force? He knows the deep magic better than that. He knows that unless I have blood, as the law says, all Narnia will be overturned and perish in fire and water. Like we just mentioned, the palace of Charn coming down around our ears if we violate the laws established by God. It is very true, said Aslan. I do not deny it. Oh, Aslan, whispered Susan in the lion's ear. Can't we? I mean, won't you? Will you? Can't we do something about the deep magic? Isn't there something you can work against it? And this is the whole point.
Yeah, this is the important part.
Work against the Emperor's magic? Said Aslan, turning to her with something like a frown on his face. And nobody ever made that suggestion to him again.
No discussion.
There is no violating the guardrails, the laws that God has put in place. The consequences are there, and the laws must be obeyed, and if we violate them, we will pay the consequences. Going back to the magician's nephew. Alas, said Aslan, shaking his head, it will. Things always work according to their nature. She has won her heart's desire. She has unwearying strength and endless days like a goddess. But length of days with an evil heart is only length of misery.
Right.
And already she begins to know it. All get what they want. They do not always like what they get.
Very good.
So things work always according to their nature. When you engage in the act of making love, you're probably going to eventually produce a child. That's the way it works. And if we put on our blinders and pretend that women sort of magically become pregnant instead of having any responsibility in it.
Mm-hmm.
We're denying reality itself
Right.
and acting the part of magicians,
Right.
which we see
Exactly.
all around us in today's world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's
Exactly.
maddening.
It is.
I nearly ate one myself, Aslan, said Diggory.
Mm-hmm.
Would I? You would,
Mm-hmm.
child, said Aslan. For the fruit always works. It must work. But it does not work happily for any who pluck it at their own will. And the witch tempted you to do another thing, my son, did she not? Yes, Aslan. She wanted me to take an apple home to mother. Understand, then, and this is following on that idea that things always work according to their nature.
Mm-hmm.
Understand, then, that it would have healed her.
Right.
Again, this is the mother thing, too.
Right. Exactly.
But not to your joy
Mm-hmm.
or hers. If you do it the wrong way, if you cross the will of God, you'll pay the consequences. The day would have come when both you and she would have looked back
Loathe.
and said it would have been better to die
Right.
in that illness.
Mm-hmm.
Sin bears inevitable consequences, and they always play out, and the results are never good.
Mm-hmm.
Following God, we find joy, peace, happiness, but crossing the will of reality, which God is, always brings pain, agony, and despair.
Mm-hmm.
That is what would have happened, child, with a stolen apple. It is not what will happen now. What I give you now will bring joy. It will not.
Oh, John.
It will not in your world give endless life, but it will
Mm-hmm.
heal. Go, pluck her an apple from the tree.
Mm-hmm.
He gives us our heart's desire. The reason this is so poignant to me is that he gave me my heart's desire with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's what I've wanted all my life. And he asks so little.
Right.
And if we give it, he blesses us with so much.
Mm-hmm.
For a second, Diggory could hardly understand. It was as if the whole world had turned inside out and upside down, and then, like someone in a dream, he was walking across to the tree, and the creatures were cheering too.
Mm-hmm.
He plucked the apple and put it in his pocket. Then he came back to Aslan. Please, he said, may we go home now? He had forgotten to say thank you, but he meant it, and Aslan understood. Chapter 15, the end of the story, and the beginning of all the others.
Mm-hmm. We know.
Yeah.
Well, we'll let you cry a little bit over there. We'll let you cry over there. And I'll just tell that
I told you earlier today I wanted to try to avoid crying in any of this. I didn't succeed.
Oh, that's why I love you. I mean, that's not the only reason. That's one of the main reasons. So Diggory takes the apple to his mother.
Yes.
And she gets better.
Yes.
And she's healed, and his dad comes home, and they become a family again. And he takes the seeds from that apple, and he plants them, and they grow
along with all the rings of Uncle Andrew.
Yeah, and they grow a tree.
Yep.
And the tree actually, even if there's no wind, the tree will blow.
Blowing in Narnia.
Right.
Yes. So it's like in sympathy with the Narnian tree.
Right. And quantum physics.
That's right. You're brilliant. I hadn't thought of that at all. It's like what is it? What do we call it? Spooky action at a distance that Einstein referred to. It's called quantum entanglement.
Right.
Yes. That's a really neat correlation.
So the tree, eventually there's a storm, the tree falls down.
Right.
And Diggory, well, first of all, they move out into the country,
Right.
and
So
they
actually, the
forgot
great
about
uncle
that.
or whatever, great uncle Kirk dies,
And
and he wills that
right.
big house to them,
He
and then he
uses
makes the wardrobe.
lumber
Yep.
to make the wardrobe.
Yep.
And that's why in the next book,
Right. In
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the children get to Narnia.
So the magic continues.
Where they come out at the lamppost.
Right. And then we'll end with this. When Diggory and his people went to live in the big country house, they took Uncle Andrew to live with them. For Diggory's father said, "We must try to keep the old fellow out of mischief, and it isn't fair that poor Letty should have him always on her hands." Uncle Andrew never tried any magic again, as long as he lived. So even old dogs can learn new tricks.
Yeah.
He had learned his lesson, and in his old age he became a nicer and less selfish old man than he had ever been before. So it has done him good. But he always liked to get visitors alone in the billiard room and tell them stories about a mysterious lady, a foreign royalty, with whom he had driven about London. "A devilish temper she had," he would say. "But she was a dem fine woman, sir. A dem fine woman."
The glory days and the revolution.
And thus ends The Magician's Nephew.
Right.
I have enjoyed this so much with you, my love.
And then we have moved on to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and now we're under The Horse and His Boy.
Right. So we're going to have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, but
in the coming weeks.
But in the coming weeks, we want to do the evident,
and faith.
Right,
yes,
exactly. So we want to work on that too.
So
you finally completed that after how long?
Yeah, that's been a long trek through the evidence and faith. So we've got a lot lined up for you folks. Keep listening, and we look forward to doing this again soon. I am a Christian, with the searching and skeptical mind of an atheist. I don't want to believe anything that isn't true. I know both sides of the looking glass, and I know them with open eyes. I choose Christ's side. I invite you to join me from wherever you stand before the looking glass. That's this week's episode. Thanks for listening. And remember, you can have your religious cake and eat it too. You can have reason, respect for science, a 21st century worldview, and be a Christian.